She had a choice the day her husband died: tell everyone about the fortune he left behind, or stay silent and watch who would love her when they thought she had nothing. What happened next would change everything she believed about family, loyalty, and the true price of knowing someone's heart. Before we dive into this story, if you love deep emotional narratives that reveal the truth about human nature, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. The rain fell heavy the day they buried Daniel, not the gentle kind that whispers against windows, but the violent, angry type that drowns out everything else. The kind that makes you wonder if the sky itself is grieving. His wife stood at the graveside, watching the mahogany coffin disappear into the red earth. She wore black, as expected. Her face was covered by a veil, as tradition demanded. But beneath that thin fabric, her eyes were dry. Not because she didn't love him. She loved him more than her own breath. But because she'd already cried every tear her body could produce in the hospital room 3 days before, holding his hand as his heartbeat became a flat line. 12 years. That's how long they'd been married. 12 years of shared morning coffee, late-night conversations, and dreams they whispered to each other in the dark. No children had come, despite their prayers and doctor visits and desperate hopes. Just the two of them, building a life from love and determination. As the priest spoke the final words, she heard it, a whisper, sharp and clear despite the rain. Let's see how long before she runs out of money. It was Daniel's mother, leaning toward her sister, both of them standing just a few feet away. They thought the rain covered their voices. They were wrong. She didn't turn, didn't react, just filed that moment away in a corner of her mind that was quickly filling with similar observations. Grief has a way of sharpening the senses. You start noticing things, the way people look at you, the calculations happening behind sympathetic eyes, the vultures circling, waiting for weakness. 3 days after the funeral, they came. Daniel's brothers arrived first. Kunle, the eldest, walked into her living room like he owned it, his wife trailing behind him with barely concealed eagerness in her eyes. Then came Femi, the middle brother, who'd borrowed money from Daniel twice and never paid it back. Daniel's mother came with her sister, both dressed in fresh mourning clothes that looked expensive. Even a cousin she hadn't seen in 5 years appeared, suddenly concerned about her well-being. They filled her living room with their presence, their expectations, their barely hidden impatience. And when the lawyer walked through the door carrying Daniel's will in a leather briefcase, the room fell silent. Everyone leaned forward. The reading was quick, clinical. Daniel had left small gifts to his family: a car for Kunle, a piece of land for Femi, money for his mother's medical expenses, thoughtful, generous gestures. And then came the final clause: "To my beloved wife, I leave everything else. All remaining assets, accounts, and holdings are hers to do with as she sees fit." The lawyer closed the folder. The room stayed silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then came the questions. Everything else? What does that mean? What accounts? What holdings? Surely he specified amounts. The lawyer explained that the details were confidential between Daniel and his wife. That was his wish. His final wish. Kunle's face darkened. His mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Femi exchanged a look with his wife that said more than words ever could. But what none of them knew, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that everything else meant 250 million naira sitting quietly in an offshore account Daniel had built through years of careful investments and business decisions. He'd told her about it on his hospital bed, his voice weak but his eyes clear. "Don't tell them," he'd whispered. "Not right away. Wait, watch. See who treats you right when they think you have nothing. Because that's when you'll know who really loves you." She'd promised, and now sitting in her living room surrounded by people who wore sympathy like masks, she decided to keep that promise. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, out of curiosity, because she needed to know the truth about the people she'd called family for 12 years. The test began quietly. She didn't change anything about her life on the surface, didn't renovate the house or buy new furniture, didn't replace her old clothes or upgrade her phone. She told the driver Daniel had employed that she could no longer afford his services, thanked him for his years of dedication, and gave him a severance package from her personal savings. She started taking public transportation, started cooking her own meals instead of having help, started living, by all appearances, like a woman whose husband had left her comfortable but not wealthy. The calls slowed within weeks. First, it was Kunle, who stopped returning her messages about family gatherings. Then Femi's wife, who'd promised to check on her weekly, disappeared entirely. Daniel's mother still called, but the conversations grew shorter, colder, more transactional. The sympathy visits stopped. The invitations to family events dried up. And slowly, methodically, she became invisible to the people who'd surrounded her at the funeral. 6 weeks after Daniel's death, Kunle came to visit. Not to check on her, not to bring food or ask how she was sleeping. He came to ask for money. "I have a business opportunity," he said, sitting in her living room like he'd never left. "Import-export, very profitable. I just need capital. 200,000 naira would be enough to get started." She looked at him, this man who was her husband's brother, who'd eaten at her table countless times, who'd laughed at Daniel's jokes and promised to always protect his younger brother's wife. "I don't have it," she said simply. His face changed. The mask slipped. "You don't have 200,000 naira after everything Daniel left you. He left me the house and some savings, that's all." Kunle laughed, not a warm laugh, a bitter, mocking sound. "You see, even with all of Daniel's hard work, all his education, all his planning, you're still poor, poor at heart, poor in spirit. He should have married someone who knew how to build on what he left." He stood up, didn't say goodbye, just walked out, leaving his words hanging in the air like poison. That night, she cried for the first time since the funeral, not because of what he said, but because he meant it. Every word. By the 3rd month, the transformation was complete. She'd become a ghost in her own family. Present but unseen. Acknowledged but unimportant. They still invited her to major events, the ones where her absence would be noticed and whispered about. But the warm inclusion she'd once known had evaporated like morning mist. Except for one person. Chika was the daughter of Mr. Ease, the gatekeeper who'd worked for Daniel for 8 years before retiring due to age. She was a young woman, maybe 25, working as a nurse at the local clinic. She'd come to the funeral to pay respects, had hugged her without saying anything, and then left quietly. But 3 months after Daniel's death, Chika started appearing. First with a pot of soup. "I made too much," she'd said with a smile. "Thought you might want some." Then with offers to help with shopping. "I'm going to the market anyway. Give me your list." Small gestures, consistent gestures, never asking for anything in return. One evening, Chika came by with bread and tea and stayed to talk. "How are you really doing?" she asked. Not the polite question people throw out expecting a polite answer. A real question, asked with real eyes. "Some days are harder than others," she answered honestly. "That's normal," Chika said. "My mother died when I was 15. People checked on my father for maybe a month, then they forgot. Like grief has an expiration date." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. "Why do you come here?" she finally asked. Chika smiled. "Because Mr. Daniel was kind to my father when nobody else was. Gave him a job when other people said he was too old. Paid for my school fees twice when my father was short. I never forgot that, and I won't forget you either." For the first time in months, she felt something crack open in her chest. Something warm and painful and necessary. She had one person who saw her as human, not as opportunity. One person whose love didn't come with conditions. The 4th month brought a test she didn't expect. Daniel's mother fell ill. Malaria, complicated by her age and diabetes. She was admitted to a private hospital, the kind with air conditioning and attentive nurses and bills that climbed higher every day. Kunle called at midnight. "Mama is in the hospital. We need 500,000 naira for treatment. The doctors won't do anything until we pay." She was silent for a moment, thinking, calculating, not the money, but the moment. "I can give 50,000 naira, she said. "That's what I have available." 50,000 naira? Are you joking? This is Mama we're talking about, Daniel's mother, your mother-in-law. I know who she is. Then act like it. If Daniel were alive, Mama wouldn't be suffering like this. He'd move heaven and earth to help her. "Daniel isn't here," she said quietly. "I am, and I'm giving what I can." "You're selfish. Wicked. Daniel married the wrong woman." He hung up. She transferred the 50,000 naira immediately. Then she opened Daniel's journal, the leather-bound book he'd kept on his nightstand, filled with his handwriting and his thoughts. On the first page, he'd written something she'd read a dozen times but never fully understood until now. "Don't use wealth to win love. You'll only buy loyalty that expires when the money runs out. Real love shows up when you have nothing to offer but yourself." She closed the book, made a decision: the 250 million naira would stay untouched. Not forever, but until she'd seen every heart clearly, until she knew, without doubt, who stood with her for her and who stood with her for what she had. A year after Daniel's death, she made a choice: not to announce the money, not to reveal the inheritance, but to start building again, on her own terms. She took 500,000 naira from her personal savings, the money she'd earned years ago working as an accountant before marriage, and opened a small tailoring shop in a modest part of town. She called it Daniela's Touch, a combination of their names, a tribute to what they'd built together. The shop was tiny, just her and 2 sewing machines and fabric samples arranged carefully on shelves. But it was hers, built not from Daniel's money, but from her own determination to move forward without depending on anyone's opinion of her worth. Business grew slowly. Word spread about the quality of her work, the attention to detail, the reasonable prices. She made dresses for weddings, repaired torn clothes, altered suits for men who'd gained or lost weight. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. 3 months after opening, a man walked in. He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a slight limp. He carried a bag of clothes that needed adjusting. "I'm Tunda," he said with a warm smile. "I just moved to the area. Heard you're the best tailor around." She took the clothes, measured carefully, quoted a fair price. He became a regular customer. Every few weeks, he'd bring something new. A shirt that needed taking in, trousers that were too long, and each time he'd stay a little longer to chat. "How did you learn to sew like this?" he asked one day. "My grandmother taught me," she said every woman should know how to create something with her hands, something that doesn't depend on anyone else. Smart woman. The smartest I've ever known. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. He was a civil engineer, recently relocated for a project nearby. Divorced, no children, rebuilding his life just like she was. One afternoon, he offered to help her move some heavy fabric bolts. "I can pay someone," she said quickly. "I know you can," he replied. "But I'm here now. And I'm offering as a friend, not for payment." She studied his face, looking for hidden motives, for calculations behind kindness. She found nothing but sincerity. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." Over the following months, Tunda became a fixture in her life. Not intrusive, not demanding, just present. He'd bring lunch sometimes. "I ordered too much," he'd say with a knowing smile. He'd walk her to the bus stop when she closed late. "I'm heading this direction anyway." He never asked about her finances, never hinted that she should want for anything, never made her feel like her value was tied to what she owned. One evening, sitting outside her shop watching the sunset paint Lagos orange and purple, he said something that stopped her heart. "You know what I admire most about you?" "What?" "The way you smile even when life has given you every reason not to. That takes strength most people don't have." She turned to look at him, really look at him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why do you spend time with me? I'm a widow running a small shop. I can't offer you anything impressive. No connections, no wealth, no status." He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "Maybe that's exactly why. You're real. In a world full of people pretending to be something they're not, you're just you. And that's more impressive than anything else you mentioned." She felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been closed for so long, it hurt to open. But it was a good hurt. The kind that means healing has begun. 2 years after Daniel's death, she was ready, not because the grief had vanished, Grief never fully vanishes, it just becomes part of you, woven into who you are, coloring everything with a shade of memory and loss. But she was ready to reveal the truth, to end the test, to show everyone what she'd learned about human nature and about herself. She invited the family over. Kunle, Femi, Daniel's mother, all of them, even the cousin who disappeared after the funeral. She served them a feast, the kind Daniel used to love: pounded yam with egusi soup, fried plantains, grilled chicken, fresh zobo. She cooked it all herself, every dish prepared with care. They ate in awkward silence at first, stealing glances at each other, wondering why they'd been invited. Halfway through the meal, she stood up. "I want to thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice was steady, clear. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've kept hidden for 2 years." The room went silent. Forks stopped moving, eyes fixed on her. "When Daniel died, he left me something more than just everything else from the will. He left me 250 million naira in an offshore account, money he'd invested and saved over years of careful planning." You could hear the exact moment understanding hit them, the sharp intake of breath, the widening eyes, the forks clattering against plates. Kunle spoke first. "You've had 250 million naira this whole time?" "Yes. And you didn't tell anyone?" "No." "Why?" His voice was rising now, anger bleeding through the shock. "While Mama was sick? While I was struggling with my business? While we all thought you were barely getting by?" She looked at him calmly. "Because Daniel asked me to wait. He told me to watch who would treat me right when they thought I had nothing. He said that's how I'd know who really loved me, and who loved what I could give them." The silence that followed was deafening. Femi's wife stood up abruptly, face flushed. "This is cruel. This is honest," she interrupted. "This is honest. For 2 years, I've watched how you all treated me. The calls that stopped, the invitations that dried up, the sympathy that evaporated the moment you thought I couldn't be useful anymore." Daniel's mother was crying now, silent tears running down her aged face. She turned to her mother-in-law, and her voice softened. "Mama, I've never stopped respecting you as Daniel's mother. But that night at the funeral, when you wondered how long before I'd run out of money, I heard you, and it broke something inside me. Not because you said it, but because you meant it." The old woman covered her face with her hands. Then she turned to Chika, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, confused about why she'd even been invited. "Chika, you're the only person who came to see me regularly over these 2 years. You brought food, asked how I was doing, sat with me when the loneliness was too heavy. You never asked for anything, never expected anything. You just showed up." Chika's eyes were wide with surprise. "I'm starting a foundation for widows, women who've lost their husbands and suddenly find themselves invisible to the world. It'll provide skills training, financial literacy, emotional support, everything I wish I'd had, everything I had to figure out alone." She pulled out an envelope and handed it to Chika. "You'll be the director, if you want it. Full salary, full authority, because you showed me what real love looks like when it's not expecting anything in return." Chika's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Tears streamed down her face. "And for the rest of you," she continued, turning back to the family, "I haven't forgotten you. Daniel loved you. That means something to me. Mama, your medical expenses will be covered. Kunle, Femi, I'll help with your businesses, not because you earned it, but because Daniel would want me to." Kunle's face crumbled. I don't deserve." "No, you don't," she said simply, "but grace isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to love anyway." The room dissolved into emotion, tears, apologies, confessions. Daniel's mother reached for her hand, squeezing it tight, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over. She squeezed back. Forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was possible. "There's one more thing," she said as the room began to quiet. "I'm getting married again." More shock, more wide eyes. "His name is Tunda. He's been in my life for over a year. He treated me like I mattered when he thought I owned nothing but a small tailoring shop. He loved me for who I am, not what I have. That's the kind of love Daniel wanted me to find. And I found it." 3 years after Daniel's death, Daniela's touch had transformed. What started as a small tailoring shop had become a women's empowerment center. The foundation operated from a renovated building downtown, offering free sewing classes, financial planning workshops, grief counseling, and small business loans to widows trying to rebuild their lives. Over 200 women had passed through its doors. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. All of them left with skills, confidence, and hope they didn't have when they arrived. She and Tunda had married in a small ceremony, intimate and meaningful, surrounded by people who loved them for who they were. He'd proposed 6 months after she revealed the inheritance, getting down on one knee in her shop after hours, holding a simple ring and saying words that made her heart remember it could still feel joy. "I don't care about the money," he'd said. "I care about waking up next to someone who reminds me every day what strength looks like. Will you marry me?" She'd said yes through tears. Chica had become more than an employee. She'd become family, the sister she never had. Together, they ran the foundation with passion and precision, changing lives one widow at a time. The relationship with Daniel's family had healed slowly, not completely. Some wounds take longer than others. But there was peace now, understanding. Kunla had apologized properly, months after the revelation, admitting he'd been blinded by jealousy and entitlement. Femi had started including her in family decisions again. Daniel's mother called weekly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask advice, always ending with, "I love you, my daughter." One evening, sitting on her porch watching the sunset with Tunde, a young widow from the foundation approached her. "Ma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you do it? How did you forgive your family after everything they put you through?" She was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. About the journey, about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, standing at a graveside in the rain, and the woman she'd become. "I didn't forgive them because they deserved it," she said finally. "I forgave them because holding on to anger was destroying me more than it was hurting them. And because I realized something important." "What's that?" "That Daniel's greatest gift to me wasn't the money. It was the clarity. He gave me a chance to see people as they truly are. And once you see clearly, you can choose how to respond. You can choose bitterness, or you can choose grace. I chose grace. Not for them, for me." The young widow nodded slowly, processing the words. "And what about the people who were good to you? Like Chica?" She smiled. "Those are the people you hold on to. The ones who show up when there's nothing to gain. Those are your real family." Tunde reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. Later that night, alone in her room, she opened Daniel's journal one more time. She'd read every page, dozens of times, but there was one entry near the end she kept coming back to. It was dated a week before he went to the hospital for the last time. "My darling wife, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry for leaving you. Sorry for the pain that's coming, but I'm not sorry for the test I'm asking you to perform. Because I know you. You're strong enough to endure it, wise enough to learn from it, and brave enough to forgive when it's over. Use the money to build something beautiful, not for my memory, but for your future. And when you're ready, let yourself love again. You deserve it. Don't let my death be the end of your joy. Let it be the beginning of your freedom. I love you, always. Daniel." She closed the book, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of grief this time. They were tears of gratitude. For the husband who loved her enough to teach her even in death. For the family who showed her the truth even when it hurt. For the friend who stood with her in the darkness. For the man who loved her back to life. And for herself, for surviving, for growing, for choosing grace over bitterness. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think differently about love, loyalty, and the true measure of family, then do me a favor, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe so you never miss stories that matter, and drop a comment telling me what you'd do in her position. Would you have revealed the money immediately? Or would you have done the same test? Because the truth is, we all want to know who'd love us when we have nothing to offer but ourselves. That's the most human desire there is. To be loved not for what we have, but for who we are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.